The Lowdown, audio downloads for life. The Lowdown, a short history of the origins of World War I, written by John Lee and presented by Steve Devereaux.
Introduction. The summer of 1914 was glorious. The approaching holiday season held out great promise. It was a time of increasing prosperity in Europe that saw living standards rising everywhere, if not entirely evenly, throughout society. Suddenly, within 5 weeks of an assassination in an obscure corner of the Balkans, all the great nations of Europe were at each other's throats in a war that would destroy the lives of millions. The 28th of June was, and still is, a national holiday in Serbia. Somewhat oddly, it commemorates a terrible defeat of the Serbians by the Ottoman Turks in 1389 at the Battle of Kosovo. But in August 1913, Serbia recovered the lost province of Kosovo from the Turks, and the 28th of June 1914 was the first time they could really celebrate the reunification. Because this was such a politically sensitive date, many people had warned the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the imperial throne of Austria-Hungary, that it was not a good day to make a state visit to Sarajevo, capital of neighbouring Bosnia, likely to be sharing the excitement of their brother Slavs. But he, considering himself more of a friend to the Slavs than many in the ruling circles of Austria, went ahead with the plans that tied in with the summer manoeuvres of the Austrian army. On the morning of the 28th of June 1914, the Archduke and his wife Sophie were assassinated in Sarajevo by a group of young Bosnians dedicated to the liberation of their homeland from the Austrians. This seemingly local problem on the far borders of the Austro-Hungarian Empire suddenly escalated madly until most of Europe plunged into a war that lasted for more than 4 years. A war that saw the destruction of 4 empires and the deaths of many millions of people. Its consequences would cause another world war in about 20 years' time, and another traumatic transformation of the world. Why, amidst all the tensions in early 20th century Europe, did this particular incident in Sarajevo lead to Austria delivering an unacceptable ultimatum to Serbia, which would lead to Russia mobilising in support of Serbia, Germany in support of Austria, and then France and Britain in support of Russia? In this title, we will try to explain the tension constantly bubbling below the surface of European and world affairs at a time of intense national rivalry and frustration, colonial and commercial disputes, and a ruinously expensive arms race that made an explosion into violence almost, but not completely, inevitable. Part 1. A balance of power in Europe is created and disturbed. The last time Europe had been engaged in a general war involving most of the continent had been the 23 years of fighting against the French Revolution and the Empire of Napoleon that ended in 1815. The victors, Great Britain, Russia, Prussia, which comprised parts of modern-day Germany and Poland, and Austria, had been joined by Royalist France in an evenly matched domination of Europe, which gradually, if unevenly, enriched itself through the Industrial Revolution of the early 19th century. There were a number of wars at varying intervals, usually related to the national aspirations of various peoples seeking greater degrees of self-governance. Countries like France and Russia might intervene in some of these fights, but the overall balance of power in Europe was not disturbed. Until, that is, a series of victories by Prussia finally united the dozens of kingdoms, principalities and duchies into a united German empire. Prussia had been a relatively poor and minor kingdom in northern Germany with no defensible borders. It was obliged to create a highly professional army to guarantee its independence from the surrounding superpowers, Russia, Sweden, Austria and France. And this army became the embodiment of the state. Under the deadly efficiency of King Frederick II, also known as Frederick the Great, it became the model to be copied.